Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to cover 10 ways you can learn and practice different languages. So I'm just going to give you a list of ways you can practice languages and give my thoughts and show which one I've used. Of course, some people can have different opinions on this. Some people find things more useful than others. It's just my opinion of what I think about these things and how useful I find them. So number one is, for me, probably the most important thing, which is reading. So it could be reading books, it could be reading articles, reading anything written by native speakers in that language is one of the most important ways and probably the best ways to learn new words, new vocabulary. You can also listen with an audiobook. So say if you find, I don't know, some regular book with an audiobook or someone reading it, you can listen to pronunciation as well. So it's like you're practicing listening and speaking at the same time. It's probably the best way for me to learn new words and phrases. It's probably the most useful for me. At the start I was kind of stubborn and didn't really want to read many things. Then I watched a talk by a guy called Stephen Krashen called The Power of Reading, and he basically showed that to learn most things in our lives, and it's not the boring you need to read that helps you learn. It's the I want to read this is interesting for me. So you've got to find things that are interesting for you to read. And they've done studies on this with like prisoners where they've given them access to books they want to read, and their academic performance improved a lot just from simply reading things they liked. So maybe you think that reading is too difficult for a beginner. Well, you can find short stories that are very simple, and I translate the words I don't understand. So it's not that I know everything already. You can pick articles of basic level. Sometimes you can just pick simple dialogues to read. Just try to find something to read and translate words you don't understand. The next one is watching films, TV series. Also, YouTube videos kind of counts for this. This can be very useful. It's probably the second best because you're not really, well, unless there are subtitles. Sometimes there are subtitles. It's mostly listening practice, and you can find on YouTube or TV series or films different accents that can be good for practicing. One problem with films that is very annoying, also with TV series, say for example you have a TV series originally in English and they translate it in the language you want to learn, or any language, say Korean to English or something like this, and you try to watch it in English with subtitles. The subtitles will be different, completely different to what they're saying, because different people translate different things. What you really want is what are called closed captions. Subtitles are for people who are listening in the original language and want something at the bottom to read to understand. They're different, and different teams do different translations. If you want to see an interesting video about how this works, you can look at Tom Scott's video about the differences between subtitles and closed captions. So for that reason, I normally try to find TV series or films in the original language if I want to find subtitles that are actually correct, because if you find it in the original language, the subtitles will be the same. So when I was learning Russian, I used the series called Kuchnia, which is kitchen, I guess, in English, which is a good comedy series, also kind of a drama, which is a very good series actually. For Italian, I couldn't really find that many good TV series. I tried to watch Subora, which is it's a Netflix series about gangs, members of gangs in Rome. The problem is they speak with a Roman dialect, so you won't understand a word they're saying, so it's not very useful. It's rare that I could actually find something in Italian originally that's both interesting and not too ridiculously hard to understand. In Spanish I used La Casa de Papel, or Money Heist in English, which is a great TV series. Obviously it's about people trying to rob, like a group of people trying to rob lots of money from a money printing I guess a money printing factory, the place where you print money in the government. So TV series, films, YouTube videos, a good way to practice listening mostly. Okay, number 3 we have language exchanges or lessons. They're very similar. The difference between lessons is, one, you have to pay, but also the whole thing will be in the language you want to learn. It's very rare that you could get a language exchange just in the language you want to learn. Maybe you could, but depends, I guess. So normally with language exchanges, it's like you do 50% in one language, 50% in the other, just to help them practice too, because it's an exchange. I mean, one thing that could be a problem is if your native language is quite rare, or I mean, if your native language is English, you can find basically any language exchange you want. But if you say, I don't know, your native language is Norwegian and you want to learn German, it's very specific. You have to find a German person who wants to learn Norwegian. It's very specific, so it'll be harder to find people. So it would depend what the two languages are, how easy it would be to find. Also, some people might not be able to explain stuff to you, or maybe would speak too fast and you wouldn't understand. So it sometimes can be difficult to find people to practice with. But generally, this is the best way I find to practice speaking, because you have to speak to practice speaking. It's kind of obvious. There's no other way of doing this, and language exchange lessons are the best way to do this. And I never really traveled. For example, I can speak Russian. I've never been to a Russian-speaking country. I can speak Italian. I've been to Italy, but I didn't really find it. You need a friend to talk to. You can't just travel and expect to be fluent, because you don't really talk that much. Say if you go to a shop or a museum, you don't really say much. You have to actually have conversations to practice language, so it doesn't actually matter where you are, but you don't need to travel. Same with Spanish. Since I learned Spanish, I haven't been to a Spanish-speaking country. I've just spoken online. So you don't actually need to travel. You just need to connect with people who are native speakers of that language. Okay, next one we have is listening to podcasts. Listening to podcasts can be very useful. There are things like Pimsleur as well. Pimsleur are basically, it's like language lessons. They'll teach you the language just through audio, which I don't try to use. Well, the thing that Pimsleur is very good for are things like when you want to start speaking. Say you've read a few things, you know quite a few words, but you want to start speaking. Pimsleur can be good for this, because you're listening and it gives you prompts like, how do you say this word, and you say it. So it's a good way to start speaking, Pimsleur, but I wouldn't use it for everything. Like, you need to read. Like, you need to know how to read, you need to know how to write. So it's not everything. But generally there are 4 ways to practice languages. There's only 4. Listening, reading, writing, speaking. You need to do all 4 in some way, because it's just the best way to practice. It's like the best way to learn words is to do multiple ways. So you can read a word, you can listen to a word, you can say the word, and you can write the word. It's just, you're practicing it in 4 different ways, you're more likely to remember them. But podcasts can be definitely can be very useful. The best podcasts I've found are the ones where they write subtitles or transcripts, because then you can read it. It's just basically like reading a book then. You can just read what they're saying if you don't understand. So I normally will read if I don't understand, or if I'm a beginner or low level, I'll read along, translate words I don't understand. But this can be very good. One thing I've found is that generally people in podcasts speak a lot clearer than the average person. For example, I listened to this podcast in Spanish called Español con Juan, and I could understand basically everything he was saying, because he's kind of like a Spanish teacher. But if I put on like I don't know, some conversational speech from someone in like I don't know, south of Spain, I would not understand a word. So people speak a lot more clearly. It's a bit like watching the BBC and then going to a pub in England. It's very different. Next we have self-teaching books. So these are books like Asimil, Teach Yourself, even I guess Benny Lewis made some, like Fluent in 3 Months, I think they were called. I generally don't use these. I have Benny Lewis's book for French, but I just didn't like French enough to continue. But I don't really like these books a lot. Or, for example, Teach Yourself, for example, Teach Yourself and Asimil, I don't really like these that much, because they go into a bit too much grammar and there are too many exercises. I generally hate doing exercises unless I have a specific problem or something like this. I prefer to just read and understand grammar naturally if I don't understand something. You may think, oh, how can you learn grammar through reading? You just notice things. I don't need it to be explained to me half the time. I can just read things and notice. It's like you can understand things from context, and sometimes there are rules where you need a lot of experience in a language to understand them, and you won't understand a lot if you're like a complete beginner. You don't know any words. It's kind of hard. It's easier when you know examples of something to actually learn the rules, I find. That's why I don't really like reading these books that much. Plus, most of it's written in English. I'm just like bored like reading stuff in English. I'd rather just be reading in the language itself, because the language will tell you everything you need to know most of the time. That being said, though, I did try Fluent in 3 Months, I think it's called, by Benny Lewis. It's a very good book if you want to start speaking, because it has lots of conversations and audios. The audio you kind of have to download, which is a bit of a weird thing. But I tried the one in French, and if you want to start speaking, like you know quite a few things, and you want to start speaking, it's very good for that, because it's kind of like has conversations, has prompts to get you to start speaking and listening. So it's very good for that. Next one, my least favourite, doing exercises or reading about grammar or learning about grammar. As I said, I never do exercises at all. I hate it. I just find it frustrating. That's why I don't like Duolingo. It's mostly just exercises. I just find it boring. So maybe some people could find exercises fun or find them useful. I just never like them. What they can be useful for is, say if you have a specific problem, like, I don't know, articles in English, or I don't know, verbs in Spanish. You can find exercises with those and practice that way. So it's a good way for a specific problem. If you have a specific problem, you want to fix that, it's good for that. But I don't use them for like everything. And most of the time I just find it too frustrating, find it boring. I just want to read stuff. Just because reading, like, doesn't take that much effort. What's this word mean? And then you understand the phrase, and that's it. And then you keep reading. It's pretty low effort. But if you got to like think, okay, what's this verb ending in this situation? It's like, I don't want to use this much effort just to practice. I'm kind of lazy in that regard. The thing is, I can speak pretty well in other languages. I've never needed exercises, which means you don't need to do them. So if you don't need to do them, I hate them. Why would I? But if you want to, you can. But I've never bothered. The main reason why I don't like Teach Yourself or Asking Me or things like this, because half the book is exercises. I'm just going to skip through half of it and then I'm done. It's like, okay, why would I use something I'm not using half the book then? The next one we have is things like Anki or flashcards. So flashcards are basically when you write down a word, or you can do it on the computer with Anki. So you have, like, I don't know, you throw a word in the language you want to learn, and then you click it, turn it over, and it shows you the definition. You have to kind of, you see this, oh, what's this? And you have to try and remember. I've never done this at all. Never really think I needed to do it. Maybe it could be useful. But I remember at the start, when I first started learning Russian, I had like a list of verbs, and I was trying to learn them every day. So I had like 20 or 30 verbs, trying to learn them every day. And I couldn't remember them. Like I just couldn't remember them. I was just like trying to remember, like, for example, to cook, gotovit. I couldn't remember it ever. So I see gotovit, and I couldn't remember that it means to cook. I couldn't remember it. What I found was, when I started reading, I could remember more words. So what I found was, the more words you try to read and try and learn, the more you remember. If you just focus on like 20 words, some you'll remember, some you won't. So it's best to try to learn as many words as possible and not focus on a few. In my experience, that's what I found anyway. So I never do anything like this. Maybe you could do it if you want, but I've never found it useful. Next we have writing articles. So you could do it two ways. You could either, it's quite advanced, this is normally when you're like quite advanced. Maybe you could write something simple if you wanted to. You could say like about yourself, who you are, where you're from, like that. But it's normally quite advanced because you run out of things to say pretty quickly if you do this. So you could do it two ways. You could either write directly in the language you're learning, which is a lot harder, honestly, to do that. I never do this. I prefer to write something in English or your native language, then translate it. That's probably the best practice I have. And then if you have like a friend in the language, could you please check this for me, find any mistakes, and then you learn from your mistakes like this. Sometimes, for example, my experience with Spanish, you can cheat so easily with Spanish because Google Translate and things like that are based on usage, so how many people use them. Lots of people speak English, lots of people speak Spanish, so lots of people use English and Spanish translator in Google Translate. So you can basically just copy and paste a sentence and it will give you the correct answer most of the time, and it's not wrong. So you can kind of be lazy, which you probably should try to write it yourself first instead of doing this. But you can translate certain words. Depends what you want to write about. You could write about almost anything. It can be a bit time consuming and boring for some people, but I find it very good to learn phrases. Or imagine you speak with someone and they ask you a question and you're not sure how to say it, you're not sure about these words. Maybe something like, I don't know, you went somewhere and you visited a museum, and what did you see at the museum? You saw this, and you don't know any of these words. Write a text about it. Then you can translate the words and you can learn them. So I find this probably the best way to learn words that you don't know or you're not sure about or you forget. Or also it's a good way to learn phrases and things like this, but it can be time consuming and you need quite a good level to do this. Next we have language learning websites or apps. So this is like Duolingo, or I can't even remember anymore, to be honest. I guess italki, but italki is more about language lessons than anything like that. Maybe Babbel. I never use these at all, honestly. Duolingo I made videos about just for YouTube. I didn't actually like doing it. So I started learning Russian on Duolingo, and I basically almost quit because it was so frustrating. It's like you say, what's this sentence? Translate it into Russian. I'd spend like 30 seconds translating it, making sure it was right, and then oh, the adjective ending is wrong. Write it all again. It's like, no, I hate you. Why am I doing this? This is terrible. Maybe the app on your phone is better, but the desktop version is so annoying. So I literally almost quit because I was so annoyed, and then I just started reading. So I started reading books, and I was like, oh, this is easy. I just translate if I don't understand, and I don't get told that I'm wrong every 5 seconds. So that's why I don't use Duolingo. It's too annoying. Maybe there are other apps that are less frustrating and more useful. One thing that Duolingo is good for is if you have 5 minutes and you just want to do something, 5 or 10 minutes, then it's good for that, and it's free. But I wouldn't use it as your main tool. And one thing that apps can be good for is things like if you say you're speaking and you forget a verb ending in a language, you can have apps that will show you verb endings. If you say, oh, what's this verb? Okay, to do this. Oh, in this tense it's that. It helps you a lot. That's what I normally use apps for, but it's not for actually learning, it's more just helping me when I'm speaking. So finally we have video games, which is quite rarely used by most people, I guess, who learn languages, but it's a very useful tool. It's very similar to films, I guess. The main difference is the subtitles are correct, which is very useful when you actually when the people write what they're actually saying, which is a lot more useful than films. But you want to pick games which have some story and lots of dialogue for this to work, because you need to listen a lot. For example, to practice Russian, I played the Metro series, which is based on a Russian book where people live in metros in the future because of nuclear war. And it's in Russian with Russian subtitles. You're just immersed in the language. There's story, there's dialogue. Then for Italian, I played Assassin's Creed because it's like set in Italy 500 years ago. In Italian, you learn about Italian history. You see like Leonardo da Vinci and Florence 500 years ago. So it's like full immersion. Then for Spanish, I played Fallout New Vegas. Fallout and games like that and Elder Scrolls are very good because you need to make choices. So you need to understand what the choices are, because you might make a mistake. You might not know what you're saying, so you need to understand. So you're reading the choices in that language, so you need to understand what it says, otherwise you're going to make a mistake. Of course, video games aren't for everyone. Not everyone likes them, not everyone finds them interesting, not everyone has a computer that can play them, but if you can, they're a very useful tool, and I do recommend those. Anyway, that's all for this video. Let me know if you have any disagreements or if you find the tools useful or more useful than I do. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.